It's Tuesday, March 18th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball. A lot has happened, actually, since we've last recorded. And in this format that we have today, we're actually going to scoop a lot of that stuff up. And joining me to talk a little ball, to do all of this business, is the one and only Dwain McFarland of Fantasy Life. Dwain, what's going on, buddy?
What is up, Mr. Harmon? You know, if I would have known it was so packed, like I would have changed my fee. Wait, who am I kidding? There's no fee for me being on here. But yeah, you guys have, there's a lot of good stuff to get to on here. I'm going to have to shorten my answers. You know me, my answers can be long. I'm looking at this. I'm like, I'm going to have to go fast.
The eternal struggle for me is also shortening my answers as well. So we can hold each other accountable on this. What we are doing today. Yeah, no, it's not going to go well. What we're doing today is a free agency version of the show that we do during the regular season, the People's Panic Meter. If you don't listen to the show in the regular season, number one, I actually really appreciate the hell out of you that you're like, yeah, you know what? Regular season fantasy pod, I'm not going to listen to that. I listen for the off season. You're one of the real ones, but you should listen to the show in season as well. Let's convert you to an in season listener. But every Monday, and then comes into your feed Tuesdays, we do the People's Panic Meter, which is where you all, the people, my people, send in the players, the teams that you are panicking about on a given week. This time around, we're just doing it about what's happened in free agency. So who are you panicked about from a fantasy perspective or just an NFL perspective after what has happened in the first week of free agency? I will explain how that goes for the uninitiated when we get into it. But before we do all that, a couple of things to talk about here. Number one, some official Yahoo business. Do you all out there think you have what it takes to create a bracket that will beat me, a noted college basketball expert in this year's NCAA tournament? Well, give it your best shot. You can compete up against me and the rest of the Yahoo Sports crew in this year's bracket challenge. Sign-up links are in this show's episode notes on YouTube or in your podcast app. So lock it in. Make sure you do that. Before we get into the People's Panic Meter, we also just have one piece of news to talk about here. Dwain, the Bengals get it done. They lock up T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So our long national nightmare is over from that perspective. I don't think this news changes anything from your rankings or anything like that, because we figured these guys were playing with this team this year anyways. But now it's good to know that these two guys are locked up for the long term in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised, though, to see like how many people were like, they shouldn't have gone after T. Higgins. And I'm like, a young, good wide receiver, you know what you have in it. Like, what else are you going to spend the money on? I know that you're gonna pound the table for T. Higgins because you're a receiver guy, Harmon. But I mean, what are we gonna do? Go sign like some guard that might not be very good, like over the guy that you've already had on your team that Joe Burrow loves? Like, I don't understand the complaining.
Yeah, there's two things that stand out to me here about this Bengals situation. Number one, I'm always a fan of, yes, I am a receiver guy. I'm the lead representative for big receiver. I also am just a firm believer that you want to make your strengths stronger. The Bengals are an offensive first team, and I think it is more important to lock in the fact that you have potentially one of the 4, 5, 2, 3, number one, potentially best offense in the league with all of these guys. Chase Brown ascending. You can attack the offensive line early in the draft. You know, even Mike Gesicki was somehow part of the Joe Burrow demands. He's even back in the mix here. Like, I think that's more important than getting yourself from, one of the 2 or 3 worst defenses to the 25th best defense, which is the best you were going to do in this free agency market. So really the Bengals have to just continue to draft and develop on the defensive side. That's a part of it. But also, Dwain, I think what's not being discussed about this is that the Bengals every year, it's always something. They come into the season and they struggle in September because Joe Burrow's got an appendectomy. Joe Burrow's coming off a torn ACL. Last year, I think both receivers were pissed off coming into the year. So Jamar Chase didn't even show up until like a couple days before the damn season kicks off. Like, now we've got these guys in harmony. We've got these guys feeling good. I actually think the biggest problem for Cincinnati is not our defense stinks. It's actually, we put ourselves into a hole every September by losing to the damn Patriots in week 1 or something of that kind of family of a loss. I actually think this can help smooth that over and then get off to a better start than they normally do in September, which to me is more important for why they missed the playoffs last season, not the fact that their defense wasn't very good.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're taking a quarterback in fantasy that's not a dual threat quarterback, like the name is Joe Burrow.
Right.
I mean, that's your guy. I mean, the number 2 fantasy quarterback last year in fantasy points per game at 23. Obviously, 2023, you talked about a lot of the injuries and everything was not ideal, but in 2022 was the number 4 quarterback with 22.7. In 2021, 20.6 fantasy points per game. So the 8th best quarterback. So he's clearly like past Patrick Mahomes, like in that tier after the dual threat guys, where it's like, okay, we know they've got the weapons. They can move around a little bit. Joe Burrow actually kind of sneaky when he's healthy as far as what he can do as a scrambler. He can get you a touchdown here or there on the ground. So, yeah, Burrow is one of these guys that because he's not in the dual threat ilk, he kind of gets a little forgotten. And sometimes he falls down the draft board, and that can make him a potential value. But I'm 100% in agreement with you. And like, let's make our strengths even stronger. When you've got a quarterback like Joe Burrow, like I just can't imagine a world where you wouldn't want the absolute best weapons around him. And let's be honest, like defense is just less predictive year over year. I'm not saying defense doesn't matter, but if you've got a good quarterback and you've got good wide receivers, I do have one idea though. How about let's do a little bit more from a scheme perspective? Like, is there a coach / coordinator that lives more just off of playing with a great quarterback like Joe Burrow? And a lot of coaches, this happens to them, and really good wide receivers than Zach Taylor. Like Zach Taylor doesn't punch any of the easy buttons really for this Bengals offense. They don't use very much motion. They don't use a lot of play action. They don't confuse you with different formations and things. Now, I like the fact that they keep their best players on the field. I don't want someone to go full Arthur Smith, guys. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you taking the best play. Arthur Smith's actually a decent play caller. He just takes his best players off the field too much, right? So when you look at what we have with Zach Taylor, that would be my one other thought here is like Zach, let's step our game up a little bit, man. You're from the freaking Sean McVay tree. Like, let's manufacture some stuff for these guys to go along with the things they're just out there earning on their own.
So this is a long-standing, I'm going to call it like a half theory, half like I know this. With Zach Taylor, that I think the reason that they don't do that is the quarterback doesn't want to do any of that stuff. The quarterback wants to get out there and play spread, and Burrow wants to do that. And when you're Joe Burrow, you get to do whatever you want. Like you get to be Peyton Manning because you're the most important person in the franchise. And one of the biggest reasons that I think this to be true, Dwayne, is because we saw Zach Taylor do that with like Jake Browning when he was in there. So I think that was, hey, I can do this stuff when the quarterback lets me do it. But I don't know. I like Zach Taylor a little bit more than maybe you're giving him credit for. But I do agree with you that the offense is very much turned up on the difficulty level. My thing is that I think that the quarterback likes to play that way.
And I don't disagree with that, but usually where the quarterbacks really get like antsy about this is when you tell them they're going to have to put their back to the defense on play action, right? So
especially when that quarterback has gotten obliterated early in his career.
So you can still do it from shotgun. It's not going to be as effective, but motion is something you should be able to talk Joe Burrow into. Like, I get it. Joe Burrow comes to the line, sees what he wants, screw the motion, snap the ball. But otherwise, like, let's do things. You know, you are the head coach. That's your job to actually work with the quarterback to figure those things out. We know that they can help the team. But I digress. And again, I'm sure we've already gone over your estimated answer time on this first question.
I mean, hey, that's what we're doing here. I have one last point to make about this that's not about the Cincinnati Bengals. And it does transition us actually into the panic meter here, Dwayne. One of the responses that I did not include from the people was a lot of people, and this was just mostly because this was more of an NFL perspective. The people are panicked about the Falcons defense, and justifiably so. Like if we were to put them in the panic meter, I'd say you just go ahead and put the Falcons defense in the coping corner. Some of the words that were used to describe the Falcons defense by people that submitted were disgusting, abysmal, weird. I think all of those apply, especially to the front seven. I think the Falcons, 2025 Falcons are going to be the 2024 Bengals. And what I mean by that is they're going to be the carnival team, as to use a Scott Pianowski term. The defense is going to be terrible. And I think this offense actually this requires Michael Penix to be, I don't know, like 75% of Joe Burrow, which if Michael Penix is 75% of Joe Burrow, that's a huge hit for the Falcons. But I think if Penix can be good, this team is going to be one of those teams in fantasy. It's just like they're putting up big time numbers on offense because the offense is good and because they have to with that defense. So just like a little thing that I'm gonna start saying over the course of the offseason. I think 2025 Falcons are this year's Cincinnati Bengals.
So you also have a carnival rating. That's what you're also. So,
correct. Yes. And the Bengals are the Bengals last year were probably like the peak carnival. Top 5 receivers in points per game, top 5 quarterback. One of their running backs ended up being like the only good 0 RB pick you could make. Like they were a top 5. Mike Gesicki had a couple of moments. They were like one of the best carnival teams of all time. Defense is terrible. I think the Falcons could be some kind of a facsimile of that this year.
Yeah. I mean, look, Kyle Pitts is on the team, so it screams carnival.
Oh my God. Is Kyle Pitts going to be on the team by the end of the NFL draft? We'll see if that happens. Let's waste no more time. Let's get into our special edition of the People's Panic Meter, the free agency panic meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic?
Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening.
No. Wait.
Everybody stay calm. What's the procedure? What's the procedure? Stay calm.
Of course, again, this is a regular segment of ours in the fall, but for Dwain and for the others, here is the refresher of our panic tiers that we're going to assign to each of these answers. 1 is no panic. 2 is some panic. 3 is total panic, and 4 is the coping corner. The coping corner, Dwain, makes a little more sense in the regular season, but for this is just, there's no hope. We're not even going to talk about panicking about it because it is that bad as you think it is. We will get into all of that. Let's start with 2 mailbag submissions that we got to our email. The first is from my guy, Ethan. He sent in a long email about the Chiefs. Unfortunately, Ethan, I appreciate it. I can't read all of it. Basically, his question that he's panicking about, are the Chiefs really going to have worthwhile fantasy players that cost this season, even if everyone is healthy and on the field? His obvious exception to this was Rashee Rice, but he also sent in 3 layers of questions about if Rashee Rice can even be somebody that we count on because might be briefly suspended. He has another year recovering from an injury. That's a question, and isn't forced to maybe play more outside because Xavier Worthy needs role catering and Marquise Brown kind of needs role catering. So, Dwain, I just want to take your temperature from a panic perspective about the Kansas City Chiefs, strictly fantasy-wise. We're not going to do Chiefs panic from an NFL standpoint because that's silly. But Chiefs from a fantasy standpoint, is there any panic from you on any of these guys at any level here so far through free agency?
Yeah, I would say at the NFL level, to your point, you wouldn't have panic around the Chiefs because they have Patrick Mahomes, but you could start to panic around like personnel moves. Like, we're not adding difference makers here. We're just bringing back guys that know the offense. So that's definitely a concern. Obviously, Rashee Rice is the name here, right? That could give us the most upside based on where you're getting to draft him today in fantasy drafts. But yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, Rashee Rice was going to be an absolute smash last year before the freak accident happened, on the pick. And then Mahomes' helmet unfortunately goes, or shoulder goes into his knee. I mean, the guy he had 17.3, 18.5, and 29 fantasy points in those first 3 games before the injury. 26% target share from Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be pretty valuable. But yeah, he's probably going to start the year slow, if not suspended, which maybe that just gives him a little bit more time, right, to recover. But once Rashee Rice is back on the field, even at 80 or 90%, I think with where this offense is at, like that's a bet like I want to be making is still on Rashee Rice, assuming like his ADP doesn't like skyrocket right now. I think I've got him ranked over at Fantasy Life in the wide receiver low 30s, but knowing that eventually like he could get back to wide receiver 1 status this year. Xavier Worthy is the other interesting one. Obviously now he's got himself in some potential legal issues with what happened with the off the field incident, down here in Texas. You get down here in Texas, Matt, you just start doing weird things. So that's what happened with Worthy.
You put on a Chiefs uniform, you start doing weird things. They're like, how about one normal offseason from the Kansas City
true.
Chiefs?
This is true. You're right. We go back. We got Rashee Rice. We've got Kareem Hunt back in the day. We've got Xavier Worthy. But yeah, Worthy, like it's what they did with him last year at the end of the year. I don't know how much Worthy just like suddenly erupted into this player they could trust, but they just decided, hey, we're going to manufacture touches for Xavier Worthy. Now, he was getting a little bit more of a connection going with Patrick Mahomes down the field. Early in the year, it was kind of comical how often Xavier Worthy actually just ran himself out of bounds. And then when he would be open, like Mahomes would have a bad throw. It's like they just could not get on the same page. So there was a little bit more of that working, towards the end of the year. But man, like 31, 27, 22, 26, 28% target shares to close the season. So like it's hard to not say, okay, going into second year, your first round draft pick. I know Xavier Worthy has holes in his game, but Travis Kelce's getting older. Like Worthy, I feel like is the name that at least we know he's healthy, assuming the legal stuff is taken care of. I would want to be in on him. I do have panic though with Travis Kelce. I don't want to say it's complete panic, but I definitely have some panic with Travis Kelce. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Kelce?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with you that overall with these Chiefs, there's some. I would put it on the panic meter. Put us at some panic if we're just talking about the Chiefs offense, because it's like that's a credible wide receiver room when everybody's healthy. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, but it's all guys that I do think take some degree of role catering. Like Worthy's a manufactured touch guy. Rashee Rice was going to eat last year because Worthy was stretching out the field, and they just had obnoxious amounts of space over the middle because you're always going to play a certain type of coverage against Mahomes. But I don't think he's necessarily like a special young player. He's a really good young receiver. So again, it's a lot of okay, credible players. Even in the backfield, I think they brought back Kareem Hunt. Isaiah Pacheco didn't finish the year very well. I think that's an okay backfield. I think Travis Kelce, I'm with you. I'm actually probably more closer to total panic on what Kelce is at this point. But I just think this offense, maybe I could end up being wrong because like Ethan said in his email, we also have to acknowledge the fact like we could see like a scorched earth season from Mahomes, one of those like old angry Tom Brady seasons. And that's possible, but I think just from a personnel standpoint, we also haven't even talked about the offensive line, which was a mess in the Super Bowl, and their solution to that was let's trade Joe Thuney, move Kingsley Suamataia to guard, and sign Jalen Moore, backup tackle from the 49ers. There's some risk involved in that plan there for sure. So I'm with you at some panic overall with the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's move to our next one here so that we don't get caught up on some of these responses, Dwayne. Tim C. wants us to talk about CJ Stroud. Given his regression last year under pressure, the line has only gotten worse. The weapons are injured or gone. His new offensive coordinator seems like he really needs stability after a sophomore slump. I have a really hard time projecting a return to rookie form, and there was so much change for the worse, in his opinion, around him. So, Dwayne, level of panic about CJ Stroud at this point after the Texans completely made over their offensive line. They've signed Christian Kirk, and that's it from a weapons department.
I mean, I think if you look at where people are drafting him, people already have complete panic. They don't want to draft him, in fantasy right now. I would say for me personally, like some panic. Like you would rather see a great rookie season and then you build on that in year two. But we know how these things go. It can also just come down to some random weird stuff where you got some variance going on. At the end of the day, he's still given us one really good year as a rookie. He gave us one down year. So the truth is probably somewhere in between those two things. I will say this, like Christian Kirk, like he's actually a nice fit for what CJ Stroud likes to do. He is a vertical slot player, right? He wants to get down the seam, get over the top of the linebackers. And if you look at CJ Stroud, now this does come back to the offensive line and the concerns that are correctly outlined here. He's at his best when he's buying that extra beat of time in the pocket, keeping his eyes down the field, and then just delivering that dart, right? We saw that a lot in the rookie season with Tank Dell. That was really where that connection was. So I do think that Christian Kirk is actually a good fit for the offense. I don't think Christian Kirk is like the super high-end wide receiver, but he's a good fit for what they like to do and possibly a better fit in the slot than Stephon Diggs for the way Stroud likes to play. Now, whether they can keep that all blocked up, and Stroud was seeing ghosts at times last year too. Like once you get the pressure and then that's your style of play and you start to bail out, your eyes aren't staying, where you need them to be. You're not manipulating the defense. And then some big plays start to turn into more misses, right? Or interceptions, things like that. So I think there's some panic, but I think it's already all, as far as a fantasy perspective, it's really all priced in with the way people are viewing him from an ADP standpoint. No one's trying to draft CJ Stroud in the top 12 quarterbacks.
Right. He's in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings right now is QB 15 in a large tier of like, all the, like solid quarterback twos, maybe guys who could exceed that ADP. I like your ranking or your assignment here of some panic. I think most people, like you said, are already going to put the Texans offense into the coping corner because I've seen the tweets like, what, we don't want to protect CJ Stroud. Like, why are we trading away all of his offensive linemen? Did you guys watch the games last year?
Already. It may have been addition by subtraction, possibly. I think people hear the name Laramie Tunsil, right? And so I think it's that name value that gets people.
Totally. And look, Tunsil, I think, can still be a really, really good pass protector. Here's the thing, though. I just got done charting Stephon Diggs for reception perception. So obviously it's all the first 8 games. I agree with you that in the back half of the season, I think Stroud had started to have a lot of bad habits seep into his game. But man, I'm telling you, early on, this guy just had no chance. Like I'm watching that film, and I can see D'Amico Ryans' point about, let's just completely blow this unit up from an offensive line perspective, from a coaching staff perspective, because it was, Dwayne, it was one of the biggest messes I've ever seen. So I actually think, look, change for change's sake isn't always good. I think that's why we have to have some panic here. But I come away from that experience understanding what the Texans are doing here. And I'm with you that I like Christian Kirk as not a full answer, but a part of the answer for what they need beyond Nico Collins in that receiver room.
Yeah. And Nico's just a stud. So we love Nico. And if we could just have another weapon to kind of keep the heat off of him, like that's good for him.
Yeah, I think we'll maybe be at no panic or complete panic once we see what the Texans do in the NFL draft. But I think that whole room from an offensive line perspective can come together a little bit better than maybe people are giving it credit for right now. Let's move into our social media responses from Twitter and Blue Sky here. First one comes in from @JacksJags95. And I really wanted to talk about this one with you, Dwayne, because we haven't touched on the Cooper Kupp addition to the Seattle Seahawks, which we will do here in this section. This one's just, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Sam Darnold, worse than Geno Smith. They replaced DK Metcalf, whose ability to stretch the field made JSN's life easier, with Cooper Kupp, who seemingly plays the same role in an offense as JSN, and they also signed MVS. Hard for me to imagine JSN is as productive in 2025 as he was in 2024. Dwayne, I am very curious where you stand on JSN after Seattle has, completely remade their quarterback and wide receiver rooms. And yes, after the addition of Cooper Kupp, who signed for a $15 million per year contract, which I haven't seen the full details on that. I'm imagining there's some funny money in that deal.
Yeah, so there's some concern, but I don't want to overreact because JSN is such a young player and he broke out last year. So typically you just want to be in on those sort of profiles and let the chips kind of fall where they may. Yeah, we may have to decide, like, do you want to take him over Ladd McConkey or not? Like if the Chargers don't add another weapon and you've got Justin Herbert versus what we have with Sam Darnold. But I'm not so sure Geno Smith is better than Sam Darnold, right? Geno Smith's shown it more years, but there might be kind of the same thing. Sam's definitely going to have to prove it because Geno was pressured more than any other quarterback in the regular season last year, and that has not been a calling card for Sam Darnold. So
correct, yeah. That
is a reason for concern as well. The Cooper Kupp thing, though, honestly, I'm just not going to worry about it too much. And I do agree. I agree with the duplicity, right, of what those two guys do. If you look at their average depth of target, they typically both work from the slot. It's kind of a weird fit, especially in a Clint Kubiak offense that likes to run a lot of two wide receiver sets. And you want one of those to be a vertical boundary player, which they, signed MVS to that small deal as well. So the fit is kind of weird. But coordinators change things. Maybe they're going to go with three wide receivers more this season. Maybe that's really what the plan is. And if you do that, well, then whether you're working from the slot or the outside, you can still work route concepts that both of those guys know how to handle. I will say this, though. Another reason I'm not panicking is the Rams could have kept Cooper Kupp. It's not like they signed a younger wide receiver. They signed another old wide receiver in Devontae Adams. And I think that tells us a lot about where Cooper Kupp is. Now, not necessarily a player I'm just wanting to bet against because he's so dedicated. Cooper Kupp is so dedicated to what he does. We know he's going to work his butt off to get back into playing at a high level. But man, it's just, I can't worry about it too much because JSN was so good in his second year and basically took over the offense over the second half of the season. DK had a little injury where he missed a couple of games and he came back and he's like, man, what happened? Yeah, it's all JSN now, man. So I'm not going to panic too much, but I do think there is some concern.
You made a lot of really good points there, but I think you hit the nail on the head with the Rams and Cooper Kupp. I mean, this is the team that not only knows Cooper Kupp best, but dude, Cooper Kupp is a storied, beloved franchise player, and they basically unceremoniously, like almost ruthlessly moved on from Cooper Kupp. Like there was no, he had to put out a statement about how he didn't agree with the decision, was surprised by the decision. They basically never entertained bringing him back at any cost. And to your point, they just signed another older receiver, like a guy who's been in the league a lot longer than Cooper Kupp. I think that kind of tells you all you need to know. And by the way, that's exactly what the film looks like last year from Cooper Kupp. I just think he doesn't have a lot left. I think he's a slot only off the line.
He needs the layups at this point in his career. And McVay's one of the few that can scheme that many layups. Most coaches can't scheme the number of layups that McVay gives you. And they just decided they wanted to give those to Puka Nacua.
Right.
So they went away from Cooper Kupp in the second half of last year.
That was the first signal, right? When and that was even in Puka's rookie season. It's like, well, the guy we're giving the designed layups to, that's the younger, explosive player. And then the gap just continued to grow the longer those two guys were on the field. Now, I do think some of those layups will be in this offense, and I actually think that's going to be a part of like stabilizing Sam Darnold. Okay, yeah, like you're starting to go into on the Fritz mode. Just get that ball out to Cooper Kupp in the flat. He's going to be wide open against zone coverage. Great. He's going to catch 70 passes for 680 yards or something like that. But your second point that I loved is that, Jackson Smith-Njigba was awesome. Like, this is a guy that has been a man coverage beater dating back to his prospect days. And because of the way this offense is structured, like all of these Shanahan, McVay, stuff like that, like the outside receiver is he's more condensed closer to the line than a typical boundary receiver is. Like, they have MVS to do the sacrificial X stuff. Like, JSN could be a flanker and win from the outside on like more of the big boy routes in this offense. So, yeah, I think it would be irresponsible to say no panic, Dwayne. But if we're on the scale here, I'm from a some panic perspective. I'm some leaning to none as opposed to some leaning to complete panic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there has to be some panic because there's enough factors that there's a chance one of them goes wrong. Cooper Kupp could actually just have been hurt last year and prove us both wrong and be healthy and ball out. Sam Darnold could regress to the Sam Darnold we saw with the Jets. Like, just those two things alone, like, they're risk factors. So I think you have to acknowledge that there's some panic, but the overriding factor has to be a young breakout wide receiver. Like, you just want to be in on it.
Let's move into the player that the Seahawks traded away. This one comes in from @B, bunch of numbers here. Not panicked, but I'm interested in who's going to be quarterbacking the Steelers after DK Metcalf joined the team. I mean, you're not panicked. I'm a little bit panicked about DK Metcalf and the Steelers here, Dwayne. I'm really curious how you sort of are imagining him fitting with the Steelers beyond the fact that we don't know who's throwing him the damn football right now. And by the way, at best, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and at worst, they take Jackson Dart in the first round, and maybe Jackson Dart ends up being a stud. But like most of the time, rookie quarterbacks are not good, especially guys who are kind of the back half rookie quarterbacks. By the way, we've seen an example of that in a guy the Pittsburgh Steelers took in the back half of the first round a couple of years ago in Kenny Pickett. So I don't know, man, Dwayne. I'm pretty close to complete panic, if you can't tell, on like if I'm drafting DK Metcalf right now or even this year. But where do you stand?
Yeah, I'm closer to total panic. I moved DK down into the low end wide receiver 3 range in my ranks. So I think when you look at this one, we don't, like you said, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. But let's say it was Aaron Rodgers. Okay, like that's the best case scenario. You still have an offense that wants to run the ball with Arthur Smith. You still have a coordinator that is willing to just rotate his best players off the field at any moment. Like, you're just at a 70% route participation. No explanation, nothing. It was just better to get whoever, insert name of random wide receiver here, got to get him out there to get some snaps.
Is Scotty on this team still? Has he been re-signed
yet? Yeah. So that's problematic. So you have potentially less volume in the passing game. Now, Justin Fields moving on, that means you have less dropbacks. You know, there's no chance that he's a starter, so you don't have dropbacks turning into run plays on scrambles. So that's going to help out a little bit. But then you got George Pickens. And George Pickens is also a good player. I do think they're similar, but I don't think they're exact replicas. Like, they're both big, they're both fast, but when you look at the way DK wins, he's not as good in contested catch situations, right, as Pickens. But you put him on a slant and you just put the ball on his numbers and you let him do his thing. He's better than George Pickens in that nature. So I think they can complement one another in the offense, but is there going to be enough to go around? So here's what I would say. I think it's probably as likely that George Pickens finishes ahead of DK Metcalf as it is DK Metcalf ahead of George Pickens. I'm not sure it's as likely, but it's probably closer than we think. I know DK got the money. Now, maybe they move on from Pickens, right? Or maybe they just bench him because they've had their moments, with Pickens. That would help. But if Pickens is in the mix, man, you're talking about a potential low volume offense with questionable quarterback play, trying to divide things up across two guys. And here's the other thing. Metcalf, he would be a good addition to any NFL team. But let's be clear, he's never turned into an alpha wide receiver one. He's never truly developed all elements of his game that make him a threat to do all the things like a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, the guys that are at the very top of their game. Metcalf isn't in that tier. He's a really good player, but he's not an elite wide receiver one. So when you're not, it's tough to overcome like all these sort of things. So I have DK Metcalf as a wide receiver 3. To me, that's closer to total panic than some panic.
Yeah, I think that's right. Obviously, I don't think this is adjusted yet, but again, he's wide receiver 24 in Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. I'll be below that as well. I'll be closer to like wide receiver 3 zone there as well. Just because you mentioned George Pickens, let's throw this response in here right after. This one's from Lawn Enthusiast on Blue Sky. Hell of a handle. Best one so far, but for sure. Who doesn't take pride in their lawn? If you don't, what are you doing? Anyways. He says George Pickens, the stuff he does well, DK does better. He also seems to already be a locker room challenge. Does that get worse with him being the wide receiver too? Couple things here. I agree with what you said, Dwayne. That like they're similar, but it's like they on a stat sheet they look the same. They're deep ball players. They're big guys who line up at X. But then when you actually put eyeballs on them, the way they get to those results are very, very different. So I don't think they're as kind of overlappy skill set wise, even though, again, I think they probably should both be X receivers. But regardless, whatever. The thing with Pickens is I don't think he's going to be on this team still. So that's still my prediction is that he ends up getting traded. However, in a hypothetical world, if he's on this team and DK Metcalf is on this team, I mean, I think George Pickens might be a coping corner candidate because again,
I dropped him out of the top 36, knowing that there is a range of outcomes where they flip. It's
right.
Metcalf
I think
and Pickens.
That's true.
I think they could both be massively frustrating if they're both on the roster.
Yeah, like best ball guys only potentially or something like that, which I know is like cheap analysis or whatever. Like, you don't like guess the weeks, and because they both will give you big weeks. But again, the best case scenario, I still think, is that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. And I'm not very high on Aaron Rodgers in the year 2025. So that's like damning with faint praise here.
But yeah, he's the only one that's sitting out there that I feel like would at least squints give you a chance to support 2 highly productive receivers. I don't think you're getting that with Russ. You might get one. You might get one with Russ. Now obviously, like they would never do this. Let's just sign Jameis Winston and see what happens. To steal a term from my good buddy Ian Hartitz. Man, could you imagine Jameis just out here throwing YOLO balls to these two guys? Like that would be great. But Mike Tomlin is never going to take on that sort of archetype of quarterback that just turns the ball over all the time. That's against every fiber of his body.
No, it's never going to happen. But it is the dream scenario. Is a quarterback of that archetype. And Jameis is the peak volatile, archetype or whatever, but it's not going to happen.
Like Baker's like a lesser, actually he's a better version because he's dialed things back. But I'm just going to get the ball to my guys. That's what I do. That kind of quarterback.
Yeah. Whereas, Rodgers is I get the ball to my guys, but it's only guys that I've known for 5+ years, not these 2 receivers. So I think that makes sense. Yeah. To me, I'm with you. Pickens, if he's on this roster, like if you're a dynasty Pickens, bro, you want him off. You want my little fake scenario here to happen. You want him off this roster. You want him like a draft day trade to Kansas City.
Where would you move him if that happened?
Kansas City. Kansas City's perfect. Number one, they take on wayward souls. They need a guy to play the perimeter, like a true ball winner on the outside. That's the best destination.
We've already covered that they don't mind, like if you've got some character issues.
Exactly, because I think almost anywhere else it's going to be, let's spend all offseason about talking about George Pickens in his new home, and they're sick of him by week 6. Where
would Metcalf move for you in that scenario? Back in top 24? If it's just him and say Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the spike weeks will be there. And I actually like how he fits from a route deployment perspective, like these in-breakers that you were kind of talking about in Arthur Smith's offense. So is he going to be an 80% route participation player? Probably. Are we going to have like weird, Van Jefferson's on the Titans, so we don't have to worry about Van anymore. But again, are we going to have like weird Scotty Miller's the single wide receiver in 13 personnel? Yeah, that's going to happen. But like the big weeks will be there for Metcalf. So I think he's a better overall player right now than George Pickens. So I basically think you're going to get like the George Pickens experience from.
Do you think if Arthur Smith could line up with an entire team of tight ends, like he would like to try it a few times?
Yeah.
Like no offensive lineman, just all tight ends, no quarterback, just a tight end.
No question. And I think Cordero Patterson is involved here somewhere. You know, like
with Cordero Patterson in the backfield.
Right, he's probably the wild
10 tight ends and Cordero Patterson.
Yeah, you know what? And I get it. I'd want to see that for I don't know, one snap. I think the problem is Arthur probably wants to see it for closer to 4 to 5. But that's why he's an offensive coordinator and not a head coach anymore. So I think that's probably for the best. But let's take our first break. When we come back, we will roll through more of these responses right after this. All right, we're back. Dwain, let's continue to roll through the responses to the People's Panic Meter, starting with at Fantas Chief. And I mean, talk about the People's Panic Meter, the people speaking right to my heart here. Sends in the chosen one, Josh Downs, because both of his quarterbacks run the ball well, but aren't the best at throwing it. Does he remain a Matt Harmon RP Dynasty super buy? Josh Downs, I am a compromised source here, Dwain, because I love Josh Downs. He's awesome. But yeah, I don't know what the Colts are doing. Spoiler alert, we're going to do our teams that shape the draft series here over the next month. Once we get through all the free agency stuff, there's one episode about teams that we just can't quite figure out. I went ahead and just rushed moonwalked the Colts right to that episode because I don't know what's going on in Indianapolis right now besides a lot of chaos. So Dwain, again, compromised source here on Josh Downs. What's our level of panic? And you could throw Josh Downs, all of the Colts pass catchers into this with the answer to let's bring in competition for Anthony Richardson is Daniel Jones. And like Daniel Jones with a lot of hype that he could be the one that wins this competition.
Yeah. So not ideal. That we could go from a quarterback that we hoped would throw for 150 yards to like the ceiling being maybe one that can throw 200 yards per game. Like, I mean, it's not an ideal situation. And we also know Daniel Jones, just wants to protect the quarterback. He's not trying to make the big plays and honestly, like, even though Josh Downs is a slot wide receiver, like one of his calling cards is like his ability to really win on the big plays from the slot. And historically, Daniel Jones has been one of those guys that, he likes the guy that stays closer to the line of scrimmage. And Downs can do some of that too, right? But if you really want to unlock all of his game and the things that can help score us fantasy points, it is a challenge. So I do have, I would say the panic meter is, it's a total. It's a total. And here's the thing. Josh Downs is still a really good player. So I still want to draft him. I still want exposure to him. He's a young, good player. So it's kind of back to the JSN conversation. But at least with JSN, I saw Sam Darnold like do some things last year. We've not seen any of that from these two quarterbacks. So there's obviously a lot of risk here. I do think the question though in Dynasty is I do think that Josh Downs is still a buy because he's a wide receiver. He's still young. Wide receivers, they play a little bit longer than running backs. And I think we're one bad season away from a complete hard reset here, right? On the coaching staff, everything here in Indianapolis. And if they really tank, you got a better quarterback class next year. So I guess you're hoping that you can get that young quarterback for Josh Downs. But you know how hard that is, Matt. There's receivers over the years that that have been on the list of, man, is this guy ever going to get to play with someone good? It's a rough start to Josh Downs' career.
Yeah, especially a guy that's dealt with a lot of injuries. I don't want to be in the disaster scenario where, 3 years, 4 years down the line, it's like, that was a what if situation, which that's happened to better players than Josh Downs. As much as I love Josh Downs, they go down in the what if category because they never quite timed it up with the quarterback. So that is very possible, but I agree with you because he's not that, certainly in redraft this year, again, to refer to the Fantasy Pros rankings, he's like wide receiver 43. I'll take my shot on him at wide receiver 43 because he's really talented, because he commands targets and he earns those targets because he gets open. But the reason I almost want to say coping corner for this year with Josh Downs is that
I teetered, but I thought maybe you would go there. So I left coping corner for you.
Because you want to know why, Dwain? Because when Daniel Jones signed with the Colts, my first reaction was, oh man, we could get a pretty epic like PPR scam out of Josh Downs, like very Wan'Dale Robinson style, because Daniel Jones, I think his true deep ball throwing ability has eroded dramatically after a lot of injuries. He's also not a guy that loves to push the ball because he's a little erratic. And that's already coping. That right there is the definition of coping, is saying I think this guy could basically be I think he could be Tyler Lockett, but instead I'm hoping he becomes Wan'Dale Robinson. That's That's pathetic.
When Wan'Dale Robinson is the silver lining, he's definitely in the coping corner.
Yeah, that's coping corner.
There's no doubt. I'll say this. I think Josh Downs, talent-wise, if he were in a good offense with a good quarterback, I think I would be willing to rank him as high as like a high-end wide receiver 2.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I think the talent is not in question. Availability, yes, he needs to stay healthier, but man, this guy can ball.
100%. And like, there's a lot of good receivers on this Colts roster. That's another problem. Or a lot of guys that are useful.
Yeah, so, Pittman's underrated.
Pittman's underrated. Pierce is useful in his particular role. And Adonai Mitchell showed some signs as a rookie that he could be a guy, So
yeah.
And again, now we're splitting up a Daniel Jones pie 4 ways. I keep seeing mock drafters try to put a tight end to the Colts. No. The last
Tyler
thing we need,
Warren to the Colts. Oh man.
The last thing we need is another guy to not catch passes from these quarterbacks. Okay, let's move on here. This one comes in from @MichaelRip. Time to panic in Miami. Zach Wilson's the backup quarterback while the rest of the AFC East improves. The Dolphins could be the worst team in the division in 2025. I have been teetering on a panic about the Dolphins for a long time now, because I think they're a very fragile team. It's every now and again, Dwayne, like every few years, there's just an ecosystem you should just straight up avoid. You should just cross it off your list. I'm kind of tempted to say that the Dolphins are that team for me this year. Is that overstating it?
I can't go there. Just because I do think a lot of what happened with them came down to injuries last year. Now, how much of it's going to be age, and Tyreek Hill is truly starting, he's at the age where it can happen. Like, you can start your skills diminish. We can't all be as great as we once were, as much as we would love to be. And that could be occurring. And he is the ultimate engine. What we saw last year, though, was an evolution of the offense. Now, how much of that is due to the way defenses are playing them, or how much of that is due to the injuries or deterioration of skill around Tyreek Hill, I think it's really tough to say. But what they decided to do was load Achane and Jonnu Smith up with more of the looks underneath. And then that took those plays away from Jalen Waddle as well as Tyreek Hill. So I will say this, you got to think of this as a more diversified offense heading into this year. I don't think we can make the old assumptions that we used to make for fantasy, which is, man, they're just going to load up Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. I don't care if they're actually a kind of a run balanced team if you look at them schematically, because like both guys, if you add them up, it could be like a 60% target share between the two of them. So I think that's the new risk. So I would say that there's some panic for me, but I still believe in Mike McDaniel. I think he's still got to figure out what the next counterpunch is. I think defenses have caught up with his motion. Defenses have caught up with the little things that were like unlocking the offense over the first 2 years, or over the last 2 years prior to last year. So he's got to figure out what his next counterpunch is if he really wants to re-engage, the wide receivers and not spread it out across 4 guys.
Yeah, that's my concern. Is just that these days of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill just owning 50 to 60% of the passing targets, I think those are done, because the Jonnu Smith plays were good last year. Like, I think it was nonsense to come on fantasy pods and be like, oh, why aren't they getting the ball to these wide receivers? Well, because the guy they're getting their ball to, Jonnu Smith's actually doing a lot with it. Now the Achane receiving plays, I could have done without that. I think there was some nonsense there, and I think that was a bit of a fantasy scam last season. So maybe we throw that in. But that's like the most interesting thing that McDaniel's done with the offense in this sort of like, let's push it to phase 2. I'm kind of with you though, I'm going to acquiesce to you as the guest here, Dwayne, and leave it at some panic.
Don't acquiesce.
No, I am.
Maybe I should have more panic.
No. Because I've been trying to pinpoint this Dolphins downfall, and I mean, we kind of got it last year, but then they were pretty decent when Tua was on the field. So I don't want to just keep like hammering on my take here. I actually think it's good to be challenged on my preconceived notions on this. And I don't know. I'm with you.
Where are you on Tyreek Hill? That would be my big question.
I'm not going to draft him.
So if you're acquiescing,
I'm just not going to draft him. Like, I don't know where he's going to end up. He's just not like right now. Like, he's a top 12 ranked wide receiver consensus rankings. No shot. Like, I'll take any of the younger guys in that tier. I'll take the Drake Londons. I'll take the JSNs. I'll take the T Higgins. I'll take Lad McConkey. I like Mike Evans in that group a little bit better. Like,
so you think Tyreek Hill can't have as good once as I ever was kind of season where he just quickly harkens back. It's not like he's got this long-term future, but like, could there be a ceiling one more year?
Not top 12 wide receiver season. No, I think he'll be fine. But again, like where he's going to end up going, and maybe this is one of the most unique wide receivers, and a guy like just 2 years ago had one of the most historic efficiency seasons we've ever seen. So maybe this take ages like milk, Dwayne, but I think there are other credible threats in the offense. I think that I don't have a lot of faith in the play caller pushing this to another phase. I still have offensive line concerns. I have like slight quarterback ceiling concerns. And I just think, like you said, the league is sort of caught up. Defense is all about rules, right? Like, and McDaniel's offense early on broke defensive rules. But now I think you go into a week with Mike McDaniel and you're like, let's just take that middle of the field out of the equation here, that intermediate middle. And we don't have faith that the quarterback can access other areas. So I just feel like a lot of these guys, it's past like the best point here.
So, and we're really on like the same page. Like I just updated my ranks yesterday, and I've got Tyreek Hill behind Ladd McConkey, JSN, T. Higgins, Devontae Adams, Drake London is actually up above those guys, so he's below them. So I've got him right there with Devontae Adams as well as Terry McLaurin and Mike Evans, like kind of in a group of guys. And so he's my wide receiver 15 right now.
All right, let's move to the next one here. I don't want to talk about Zach Wilson, like even as an idea. So no thanks. If we see Zach Wilson, we're back in the coping corner. Okay. Johnny MacD from Blue Sky sends in Drake Maye. And I know it's dumb. They've had a good offseason. It feels wrong to complain about it, but I don't know how without reaching on Tet, getting lucky in the later rounds, or drafting Travis Hunter to play receiver. This is wish casting. They improve his receiver core given how free agency went. Dwayne, I kind of feel like it would be irresponsible to say anything about the Patriots right now because it's still incomplete, but I don't know. My question to Johnny McD here, and my question to you is like, what were we expecting the Patriots to do right now with this veteran receiver cast that's out there?
I think the answer is just anything. I mean, because they do have the most cap. They do have the most cap space. They could have made a move to help Drake Maye because the market's not been super hot for these veteran wide receivers. Like some of them are still sitting there. Like you could go get an Amari Cooper or something like that. But like, I think you could have signed like a 2-year deal, like what the Rams did. You didn't have to sacrifice the entire future. You got some money, at least give a guy like Drake Maye something. Like I get it. You don't want to go give a 5-year deal to a 31 or 32-year-old wide receiver, but if you can give them a 2-year deal and they looked really good last year, like I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that for someone like Drake Maye, especially considering, where you're sitting in the draft. Now, I think, if the Patriots want to trade down, and then maybe they reposition themselves for someone like Tet, or I'll say this, I would be in complete favor, right, of let's just draft Travis Hunter and let him play receiver. I would love to see that, but we know a lot of teams aren't going to be willing, to do that. So I think with Drake Maye, like I don't want to say it's panic because he's a year 2 guy, but what I would say, the passing offense for the Patriots, I'm in complete panic. Like I don't like any of these receivers. Like none of them are difference makers. It's like, we got a bunch of Band-Aids that might, what happens when you have a bunch of Band-Aids? Like it just doesn't work. At some point you got to do surgery and like fix the problem. They've not done that.
Yeah, they keep doing like, all right, let's do another round of injections. Let's do another round of PT. It's like, I mean, damn, you're going to get surgery. Okay. And I just think that one thing that's misunderstood about the Patriots is this whole roster was bad. Like they needed to do what they did on defense because that defense was horrific last season. So I get they can't fix everything in one off season, even though they have the resources, cap space to do it. There just weren't enough good players in the open market to spend this cap space on. And I do like.
Do you think it's important for the development of a quarterback to at least just have somebody for a year or two, like a Devontae Adams, even though you may not win more than 8 games still?
Again, I just come back to like what did we want him to do? Like they tried to overpay Chris Godwin, and Chris Godwin said, "Thanks, I'm going to stay in Tampa Bay." I think that Devontae Adams, maybe they could have tried to like give him, I don't know, $40 million a year.
Is Amari cooked?
Oh yeah, Amari's
cooked.
He's not cooked. Like he could maybe be a receiver. I would sign Diggs. My thing is that if I'm them, I would try to make an offer to Diggs. My only thing is that I think Diggs, of all these old receivers last season, besides Devontae Adams, different separate tier there. But the DeAndre Hopkins, the Cooper Kupps, the Deebo Samuel, like when he was on the field, Stephon Diggs, I think he was the best of that group. But he tore his ACL in week 8, and I've heard nothing about Steph Diggs this entire free agency period, other than he put some Bills pictures back up on his Instagram, which had Bills fans be like, "Oh, what if we got back with Steph?" Which
they're not, I'll just say they're not doing that. Like Stephon Diggs has actually just ruined the Bills. They are so worried about a future bad breakup that they won't even date anyone anymore.
Right.
Like
so
it's like off the radar. No one with any drama can be on the team. They're just going to rotate a bunch of wide receiver 3s and 4s.
But that is the only thing I've heard about Steph Diggs in free agency, which makes me think there are some concerning medical reports there, because otherwise I think he'd be on a team by now. But yeah, I do agree that I think we need to see them do something. We need to see a Diggs. Maybe Amari Cooper just doesn't move the needle for me that much. Maybe you're a Keenan Allen team. Maybe you're like a flyer on Elijah Moore team, but they definitely need one more body in there before they go into the draft. Because I think if they got Travis Hunter, now we're cooking. So I'm with you that right now, if they walked into this roster week 1, I'm kind of complete panic for old Drake Maye there. But I think we'll see something before
once I see Travis Hunter run any routes like at practice, it's just going to be like, we're going to have to play this guy. Like he's so much better than anything they have.
I keep coming back to they're gonna be like, oh yeah, he will make a great cornerback across from Christian Gonzalez, which he would, by the way. His cornerback skill set is like perfect across from a true shutdown guy. But Drake Maye is gonna get him on the play, get him one play in training camp, and he's gonna go up to Josh McDaniels, and Josh McDaniels is gonna back him up to Mike Vrabel and say, we need this guy on offense 100% of the time. So I actually think that's a really great landing spot for Travis Hunter. But we have
just real quick. I know we got to move forward.
Yeah,
I will say on Travis Hunter, like I just did the grades on him in the supermodel over at Fantasy Life, and I'm looking at all the data points that are most predicted to future NFL production, and like I've got film ratings in there from people and stuff like that. So it's like looking at all the aspects, right, of a prospect. And the model's done really well. But when you look at Travis Hunter, like he's a really good player. Like this guy could be really special at the next level. He's got that skill set. So I'm all in the camp of like, let's let this guy get more snaps on offense. He can play defense too. Like he already did it in college. I get it. It's the NFL. It's going to be harder, but I will say this. If people are wrong in their assumptions that whoever takes Travis Hunter is just going to be in this super package 30-40% role, which is fair. Like he could totally end up in that. But there's a lot of value there, because you know how bad we are at predicting what coaches are really going to do. We're god awful at it. We're not, and they don't even know what they're going to do. They get out and practice, and the example we just saw, and they're like, oh my god, like this guy's got to be on offense. Like he's that good. So there's a lot of room for Travis Hunter to smash expectations versus what the market thinks about him.
Yeah, I think this is a minor miss and a big hit type situation if you bet on Travis Hunter. And I agree with you that I've said that since the combine, that the answer at the combine is going to be very different than the answer that we get when he gets drafted to a team, because they might just view him as a full-time wide receiver, or maybe they don't. And like we said, he gets into camp, it's like, that's our best wide receiver. And Drake Maye wants him on the field with him 100% of the time. And we got to do what we can for Drake Maye. So I'm with you. That I think we're kind of lockstep on Travis Hunter, who, if he is a wide receiver, is easily the best wide receiver in this class. I actually don't even think it's particularly close. Let's move to the next one here. This one's from J Dog Big Dog on Blue Sky. New best handle here on the show from this one. Garrett Wilson. I'm invested heavily in Garrett Wilson in Dynasty. I know DJ Moore got it done with Justin Fields, but now he's on the Jets. Feels like another wasted season coming for Garrett Wilson. Dwayne, I know you're a little perturbed about the Garrett Wilson situation with Justin Fields as well.
Yeah, I am. I mean, here's the thing with Garrett Wilson. I think he's a really good player. But he's starting to land in that category of Deontay Johnson, right? They're kind of similar archetypes as well. Like Wilson is a little better down the field, but smaller guys that, they win via separation. They can do some things after the catch. They may not be the best against super physical corners and things like that. But like overall, like most plays, they're in play. Like they're going to be one of your reads you can get the ball to against most coverages. So I really do like Garrett Wilson, but just this run of bad luck for him. Like, you finally get Aaron Rodgers, which again, not great, but it's going to be serviceable. And then they bring Devontae Adams over. Aaron Rodgers' best friend. They're eating Taco Bell together, living in the mansion with the Taco Bell counter. But
no way
Wilson,
Aaron Rodgers eats Taco Bell, right? I mean, just no shot.
No, probably not. Devontae Adams probably doesn't either. But Garrett Wilson, the issue here is whenever you talk about quarterbacks that are, and I'm sorry, you just have to say it, like, that are as bad as Justin Fields has been, it's really hard to be a high-end producer in fantasy, okay? I mean, we're talking about a guy that's averaged 156, 149, 197 in the year where DJ Moore got his, and then last year, 158 yards per game. That's just not enough, right? And so DJ Moore also ran really good that year. That he did well with Justin Fields. They were scheming him a lot of stuff. He was the only game in town. DJ Moore's also a more physical player than Garrett Wilson, that you can give him those looks, a lot of them. I'm not so sure you can stack up a ton of looks around the line of scrimmage for Garrett Wilson. Like, I don't know how well he holds up to that. DJ Moore, a little more like a running back, right? Whenever you get him out there in the open field, stylistically speaking. So I don't like this. I think this is total panic for me with Garrett Wilson. The only positive is they don't have really a second receiving option. There's no one else on the team right now that can demand targets, so that might be enough to make him a low-end wide receiver too. But I think if you're betting on him having an outcome like DJ Moore, you're just basically trying to get lucky, in my opinion.
Yeah, DJ Moore 6'210", at least what he's listed at, and Garrett Wilson's like 6'185". So there's 183. So actually, there's almost like a damn 30-pound difference between these guys. And I have stood next to DJ Moore and I've stood next to Garrett Wilson at different times. It looks like there's a 30-pound difference between these two fellas. So that's a really good point. I'm not total panic. I'm more towards some panic on Garrett Wilson, because I do want to leave open the opportunity that Garrett Wilson individually just like finally makes that leap to his full potential. I kind of hear what you're saying with the Deontay Johnson comparison, but I also think he's like the generational wealth man's Deontay Johnson.
That's fair. I love Garrett Wilson. I want to see it work out.
But like we said, sometimes it happens where these guys get on the train of bad luck at the quarterback position and they just don't get off. And I feel like, I just think the type of offense they're going to run, like Garrett Wilson might lead the league in target share of this Jets offense. Like he might have, I don't know, like 30 to 33% of the passing targets in New York, but that might equal 120 targets like raw on the season, which isn't going to be quite enough, I think, with a quarterback like Justin Fields. But I still think he had a great connection, did Justin, with DJ Moore. I do want to leave like some room for upside here, but I just want to be careful in terms of like how, like what we're paying for it. So when you're ranking Garrett Wilson, like, what do you think is the appropriate range there?
Well, right now in best ball drafts, he's going wide receiver 16. And whenever we look at the range, that I've got him sitting at, I'm a little bit below that. I've got him wide receiver 18, but like I'm still in the ballpark. I think you're looking at a tier of players. And again, this goes back to what we talked about with JSN and other guys. Like, it's not like I don't want to have bets on these players, because what you just said, they're young and they're talented, and sometimes things just work out. And you really, at wide receiver, more than any other position, you have to follow the talent, because just being on the field, it's not enough. Like you've got to actually be good to then get the next level, which is you actually get a target from a quarterback throwing you the ball. And we know that Garrett Wilson has shown he can do that. So like there are outs where things run good for him, but I think there's a tier here where they all have questions, man. You got Terry McLaurin, you got Garrett Wilson, you got DJ Moore. Caleb didn't look exactly great last year. He's got more target competition than Garrett Wilson. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., who we like, but underperformed based on maybe some really unrealistic expectations that people had last year. So Xavier Worthy. So, I mean, he's in a range of guys where it would be hard for me to say, oh, no, I'm taking all those guys over him. Like, I could pick apart any one of those players. And I think that kind of tells you the state of what, like, the mid-range wide receiver 2 looks like this year. It's kind of like a pick your poison thing. It's hard to really, pound the table and say that any one of these guys, at least right now at this point in the offseason, is the one you want.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you just have, that range of players, there's a major question or two with everybody. But I think that's the range that Garrett Wilson needs to fall into this year, not be anywhere close to where he was very aggressively in drafts the last 2 years.
Last year, man, I ranked him really high.
Yeah,
and I said like he was the guy that had the best chance of being the next CeeDee Lamb, where he had really shown all the great underlying data points, but made that big leap into the top 4 or 5 wide receivers, and it didn't happen.
I literally said the exact same thing, made the exact same like CeeDee Lamb comparison, and then watched Aaron Rodgers not be able to move in the first week of the season and felt really stupid. That was one of those where I felt really stupid like right away. And like we just all collectively decided it was a great idea to rank two Jets players in the top like 12 overall picks. That was a little much.
But again, we were leaning into young talents. Like you got to lean towards the young talented players. I do understand what you're saying with a potential dysfunctional offense, but we thought a healthy Aaron Rodgers would help. That's where we were wrong.
Alas, yes. And yeah, the healthy part was the thing I wish I had emphasized a little bit more. But let's throw to our final break. We come back. Dwayne and I actually have 2 picks of our own to put in the panic meter right after this. All right, we're back. Dwayne, the people's panic meter is over. Now we're the people. We're going to put our own little submissions here into the panic meter. And yours is a really interesting one because it's kind of more of a big picture topic. What do you think the people should be panicking about as we kind of wind down free agency and begin to transition towards the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think it's really any of the running backs that you might label kind of in the meh category. And the way that an easy way to do that is, man, they got a lot of volume last year, but were they really special in any way? And if the answer to that question is no, there's a really good chance that their team on day 2 of the NFL draft, even potentially day 3, they're adding a running back to the roster that really could challenge, the incumbent starter, especially over like the second half of the season. Might not be that big of an issue early in the year. But I think if you start to look at a list like this, Kyron Williams is on it. I mean, he's the running back 12 right now in fantasy. Chase Brown, as much as I liked him, and got loaded up with volume, it was a little bit of a carnival situation, like you mentioned earlier. Like everything worked out perfectly. Chase Brown's not like he was the most efficient player with those touches. I can see the Bengals adding someone. James Cook, they've already got Ray Davis, but like they were not committed to Cook or Davis as the full-time guy. Joe Mixon is an older player. You got Chuba Hubbard. I don't think they will because they have Jonathan Brooks, but you never know. It depends on what their doctors think about too. Brooks.
Like they just, it's not too much money, but
yeah. But still, he's in the profile where it could happen. Alvin Kamara, right? Absolutely could happen to him. So there's a lot of names in that bucket. Najee Harris will be another one. Just signed over here with the Chargers, not for a ton of money. I'm looking at him as a mid-range running back too. If they draft Omari and Hampton, that's a huge hit to a guy.
It's over.
Like Najee Harris. So this class, based on the supermodel, is the strongest class since 2018. I don't think it's as good as the elite class as 2017. Some people would disagree with me on that. And I write it up in the rookie supermodel running back write-up, which people can find on fantasylife.com for free. They can see how I had categorized it, but still, that's going back and looking at a really good class. This is one of the best classes that we've seen in the last 10 years of fantasy football because there's 7 or 8 guys after Ashton Genty that could actually land on a team and force a timeshare with some of these other backs.
No, I think this is a great call out because I think it's easier to list. I think it's easier and shorter to list guys who are safe, like who are insulated, than the list of who's not. Because I would say like, you should have let's put it this way, panic meter, you should have some level of panic unless it is Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, / David Montgomery, Derrick Henry. I mean, Devon Achane is running back 5. And I even think
you had a great tweet that went viral of if we're just one more fast running back away. I mean,
yeah, then they signed Alexander Madison, which is like the opposite archetype of what I'm talking about. But yeah, no, you're telling me that they're not going to like Mike McDaniel's not going to be that meme of the guy looking at the other girl like that was Jalen Wright last year. This year it's insert I don't know Basil Tootin from Virginia Tech with the damn big ass 40.
That would be their profile. Yep.
Yeah, I saw Hayden Wink's tweet. He had like over 6 yards per carry on outside zone. I mean, he's a Dolphin. He's already a fast 40 and he's got injury concerns too. Oh, he's a perfect fit in Miami. Okay, look, so get him a damn Dolphin on the side of his head already. But again, like I don't even know if Devon Achane is all that safe. Jonathan Taylor probably safe. Like I would say you're feeling fine. Josh Jacobs, you're feeling fine. Bucky Irving, you're feeling fine. After that, I think like everything's on the table at the running back position. I don't know.
I think even Bucky Irving, as much as I love him, like, and he can do a lot with a part-time role, but they don't like Rachaad White. Like, the real question is, how much do they like Sean Tucker? Because if they want something that's complementary to Bucky Irving, there's actually a lot of guys in this class that would be a good complement to his running style.
Yeah, I think if they didn't have two guys that were already on rookie contracts that they've given the ball to previously in White and Tucker, I think maybe I'd be a little more concerned. But if I had to lean one way or another, I'd lean safe with Bucky Irving. But I agree, I guess it's not totally off the table. But yeah, even your Chase Brown point is really good. I was at Zach Taylor's media availability at the Combine, and he several times harped on the fact that, like, yeah, Chase Brown had to play 100% of the snaps, 90% of the snaps in some of these games. We don't want him doing that. If all they do at the running back position is they do the reunion with Samaje Perine, which they did in free agency, great. Chase Brown is a winner. But if they come out of the NFL draft with somebody in the third round, there's all the reason in the world that guy could, usurp Chase Brown. So I love your call on this one. The Seattle backs too, like Kenneth Walker, I think is probably safe because they already have.
They've got 2 second rounders invested in the position over the last 5 years now. So.
Man, even the Vikings running backs, like they bring back Aaron Jones and they bring back, like they get Jordan Mason. I think that's an interesting move, but.
And there's so many. What could happen is it could push guys out of the third round into the fourth, where teams might not have been willing to do it in the third, but now they're staring at one of these guys making it into the early part of the fourth round. And they're like, man, we got a late second round grade on this guy. And now everything's out the window, guys. That's how Bucky Irving ends up with a backfield mate. Is that sort of scenario unfolds, in an NFL draft war room.
Yeah. And there's also a scenario where these really talented running backs just end up buried on depth charts because there's enough decent vets out there.
Hopefully
I don't know.
Not.
So tough to predict the running back position in Dynasty, but it is a worthwhile exercise this offseason. I'll throw a couple out here, and I want you to heat check me on how panicked I am on these. Number one, and the second one's kind of more of just an open question, but the first one, Cardinals offense. I'm a little bit panicked about the Cardinals offense because I thought they'd do something by now to supplement that group, especially from a receiver perspective. You asked about Amari Cooper earlier. I actually think Amari Cooper is a great fit on this Cardinals offense because he shouldn't be a big target earner at this point. He basically just kind of allows you to move Marvin Harrison around because he can play outside and can kind of do some of the big vertical in-breaking stuff that they did back in Cleveland. Drew Petzing was on the Cleveland staff when Cooper was there. I just think that makes a lot of sense, but I'm a little bit panicked about this Cardinals offense because, Dwayne, we're basically just counting on improvement from everybody here. Another year in the system. Marvin Harrison gets better in year 2. Michael Wilson gets better in year 3. Kyler Murray just finally the light turns on from him. James Conner stays healthy for a full season. Trey Benson's better. There's just a lot of ifs there when I like 1 or 2 additions at some point here in free agency would make me feel a little bit better about the situation.
Yeah, I think there's some panic. This just wasn't a very good offense last year. Like they've got a guy in Trey McBride, right? They can obviously feed a lot of these touches to. He came through in a big way. But if you're thinking about can this offense take the next step and have any chance of an upside of being a top 8 offense, right now I would guess the only bet you could be making, because you can't just assume Kyler's going to suddenly have a flip switch at this point in his career.
Right.
We've been playing long enough. You just shouldn't be expecting that. But you could expect a big step. You would have to be projecting a big step from Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be your path to it. So I would say there's some panic. But I could also say, reasonably speaking, if you did spend the 4th overall pick on a wide receiver the year before, you need him to progress in the next year, and you're going to kind of try to force that and see how that unfolds. So not total panic, but I do have some panic.
It's not a high percentage chance, but I think it's a not 0% chance, maybe 2%, 3%, 5% that Jacoby Brissett starts a game non-injury based for Kyler Murray this season. I think it's
you're freaking out.
I spent a lot of time.
Is that a new category? Just freaking out?
Yeah.
No, that's like coping corner.
Well, the Cardinals offense were a big feature of this People's Panic Meter segment during the regular season. So maybe there's just some residual.
Where are you real quick on Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Again, get somebody here who can take some of the the dirty work X receiver stuff off of his plate. I think he was fine as a rookie, but he just was, and I know there was some weirdness there, some of which I can't get into here, but but again, the role needs to change for him. That is just like period, end of story. I don't think he can. I don't think he fits well with what they want from like a true downfield X receiver. But I think he can be somebody that moves around the formation, wins as a route runner, and still be like a wide receiver one in the NFL and in fantasy too. So I'm not fully panicked at all on Marvin Harrison.
That's good.
I need something to show me that there will be some structural changes, and there's nothing here from a coaching staff or a player personnel addition. That's where I'm a little nervous.
So that's your main thing. Another player to help take some of those duties away from Marvin Harrison Jr. and just allow him to do the things that he's really good at and put him in a position to be more successul.
I thought that Michael Wilson might be that guy for them last year, and that just never materialized. So unfortunately, I don't think that that's going to be there. All right. Last thing here, just, again, we'll be real quick on this because I will at least admit, Dwain, that I would prefer to know who is going to throw Malik Nabers the football this season. I know it doesn't matter. We saw him thrive with the goofball crew last year. He's a target earning machine. I generally do believe that target earning is a skill and is sticky and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But when I'm looking at the wide receiver rankings and I know like who's throwing the football to all the dudes in kind of the first two tiers, and again, best case scenario for Malik Nabers, wide receiver 8 in consensus rankings right now, is he gets 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers in the year 2025. That's the best case scenario because they're not getting Cam Ward. I think he's going to go number 1 of the Titans. So, like, is Shedeur Sanders like a true needle-moving upgrade at the 3rd overall pick? Russell Wilson, no thanks. Kirk Cousins, big no thanks. Maybe the Jameis Winston prophecy that I posted
Jameis
about.
Would be great for fantasy, but like
that'd be great.
Get benched by like week 10.
Exactly. That's another thing too. Is like, he'll be pacing for 2,000 yards with Jameis, but Jameis will get himself benched and we'll be back to the Tommy DeVito experience. So, should I just be at no panic about this? That's my question here.
No, I think you have to have some panic. And here's the thing. We like to, it's recency bias, right? We like, Malik Nabers did it last year. It didn't matter who his quarterback was. And you look at the names of the quarterbacks, you're like, yeah, it really doesn't because that's as bad as it gets. But what it does is it creates a wider range of outcomes on the low end for what could happen to Malik Nabers, because I can also go back and give you multiple wide receivers that we know are ultimately really talented where quarterback did impact how they finished in fantasy. So it doesn't always work out, right? Where it's just that next season, it's exactly the way you think it's going to play out. There's variance that happens on these things. And so it could easily flip the other way on Malik Nabers next year to where even though he's getting all those targets, if only 50% of them are catchable, that's going to impact you. That has a huge impact. So I would rather know who it is. I think there is some panic. I would take any of those options though. Even if it was Shedeur Sanders, even though some people aren't like crazy about Shedeur Sanders, like I don't have a quarterback supermodel because I've not found anything that's actually gives you any advantage over just using draft capital. So I've just not had one. So, but the people that I've read, I know people are kind of split, but he's going to be an upgrade over what they had, I think, So, I mean, and Aaron Rodgers, same way. Not that we love him, but we did see Aaron Rodgers, and I know he knows Devontae Adams. He did support Devontae Adams. And if you had him on your fantasy team at the end of last year, Devontae Adams was one of the best wide receivers in the playoff run. And I think Malik Nabers is just as much of a target earner as Devontae Adams, and he's on the upward trend. So I'm with you. I would know, but I think any one of those solutions to me would be better than what you had last year when ultimately like he was going off at the end of the year with Drew Lock, and you had Tommy DeVito, Daniel Jones. We don't have to list all these guys, I guess, but some panic. But I think they're going to sign someone that makes it okay.
Yeah, I think Rodgers or Shedeur Sanders, I can live with that. Like, I'm cool with that. I do think once we get to the Russ stuff, like, I don't love that.
Yeah, I don't know that Russ is a great fit with the things they did at least last year with Malik Nabers. He's never been a great quick game guy.
No.
He just hasn't.
I actually think that would be a disaster. Like, I think from a Neighbor's perspective, like relative to expectations, it would be a disaster pairing with him and Russ. Would be my thought. But I like the way basically you said this really well. We always say it can't get worse. The number one lesson in the NFL is yes, it can. Doesn't matter how bad it can always get worse for one reason or another. And I'm telling you that as somebody. And look, I think Malik Nabers is going to be and may already be like a way better NFL player than Allen Robinson was. But for years, I'm like, well,
yeah.
Andy Dalton's better than Blake Bortles.
Again, we're back to the Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, Andy Dalton's better than Nick Foles.
Train.
Nick Foles better than Mitch Trubisky. Well, it's like great, but it's all bad. Like and just you can run bad on the variance, and then you look really like an idiot for taking him Malik Neighbors wide receiver 8 when he could get stuck with Tommy DeVito for half a season again. But
and it's all about what else is around them in that range of the draft, right? There are certain pockets in fantasy drafts where you get to a spot and you're like, all these guys have questions. I'm just going Malik Neighbors. I don't care. But there are tiebreakers where you've got another player sitting right next to them that actually has a good quarterback, and they're also a good young player. Like, I'm going to take the one that has more things going well for them. It doesn't mean that that's for sure the way it's going to work out. Malik Neighbors could still outscore that player because, again, variance. We're playing with a ball that's not round. It bounces different ways. Weird things happen, guys. And that's what keeps us coming back to it. And part of what we love about this game, it's not like it's this easily like, oh, we can all predict what's going to happen. We can't. We try our best. But I think you should be thinking about tiebreakers on players. So and if you look at where Malik Neighbors is going right now, I don't know. Like, is there someone I would really move above? I've got Brian Thomas above him because I at least I think Trevor Lawrence is not a good NFL quarterback considering where he was taken, but he's fine. Like, he can support Brian Thomas Jr., right? You got Drake London going after Malik Neighbors. Would you rather have Drake London? I think I'm leaning Malik Neighbors there. Penix has some questions too.
Yeah.
And Neighbors has already shown a better ceiling.
Yeah. I think that's close. I think they're in the same tier though. And I don't think they're going to get like drafted in the same tier, if that makes sense. Yeah. I might lean towards Drake London just because I know I think they're both really good NFL players, but I know Drake London's a really good NFL player. And I think like I've seen Michael Penix. Like I kind of know what I'm getting into there. But I think if it's Malik Neighbors with Aaron Rodgers or Malik Neighbors with Shedeur Sanders, I think I'd probably go that over Drake London.
I'm with you.
So yeah. Well, we can't always predict how these things are going to work out, but I did predict that this was going to be a great show with you, Dwain, and it was a great show. You absolutely crushed it here on the People's Panic Meter. Appreciate the hell out of you doing it. Tell the people what you're working on right now. You mentioned the rookie supermodel several times. Tell the people about it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate hanging with you. You always crush it as well. I love what you guys are doing. But yeah, you guys can go over to fantasylife.com and for free, you can check out the running back and wide receiver supermodels that are already up. I'm actually writing the tight ends today and the rest of tomorrow, and that'll be out on Thursday. So there's also a tool that you can go to, and you can see all the old supermodel scores going back to all the way back to 2018. So you can get all the details there, but yeah, go check it out. Also just put out my first version of the ranks for 2025. I feel like I do this earlier and earlier every year, and I remember like 4 years ago thinking, man, rankings in March. And like now I've already got rankings out in March. So they're going to change a lot, but it's the first pass.
Well, cannot endorse the rookie supermodel articles enough. Definitely make sure you go check those out because it will be a great time as we start transitioning to draft season. We're going to be doing that here on this show as well, because on Thursday we kick off our annual draft deep dive positional series with Charles McDonald. We're going to be looking at the quarterback class. Spoiler alert, I think Charles is looking at it begrudgingly, but we are going to look at the quarterback class this year. And as I said, when we go live, I'm going to let you know. We are going to do that show live on YouTube at 11 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the Yahoo Sports YouTube page so you can get that as it goes up. Great way to kill time before March Madness tips off. And, again, as a noted college basketball expert and who's going to watch definitely all these games, for my bracket. I mean, come on. I gotta let's do this live show and let's get into college basketball. It's going to be great. Spend some time with us while we're doing that. Until then, we are out.